Hey, welcome back to Posers Must Die, and this is part two of my conversation with artist Mark Devito, and he has been sharing many stories with us about his teenage years in the Bay Area thrash metal scene, and now I'm really going to start asking some questions about some of
Okay.
the figures and events uh, from that time. We were talking about Exodus, and I think. Maybe yeah, that's a good place to start. Like, what do you recall about your first time you collided with those characters?
Well, I mean, generally, there were several places that one would, see all walks of that metal thrash life kind of bumping into each other beyond like your Ruthie's in, and everybody, bands, fans, friends, etc., would converge in these different areas that became party spots or what if it was at Ruth if a show was at Ruthie's Inn that people like Death Angel drew in people wanted to see these guys because they
Yeah,
couldn't number one unfortunately that they got this moniker of being little kids playing, but it was
yeah,
definitely not a novelty band. I mean these guys owned it. And
yeah,
everybody was like, so, we would come out to support, we would come out to really enjoy the show and just be,
yeah,
and it was there, it was, oh, I did work for them or they're my next door neighbors
yeah.
or, there was a lot of that. So Exodus had been in that scene for a long time.
Yeah.
They had the list of songs that with a myriad of different people that had been in the band until it had solidified after with uh, uh, Gary coming in and
Yeah.
essentially
Yeah.
for Kirk and taking it to that next plateau,
Yeah.
uh, um, which again the songs were in everybody's head. They knew it. They, they were everywhere. And they there was a party house called Hell House down on San Pablo,
Oh
down
boy.
from Ruthie's. It was a bit of a trek, but we would, you could go to a show at Ruthie's and there'd be an after party at Hell House,
Oh man.
or there's a which was in a condemned old Victorian house that was right around the corner from Black Muslim bakery
Whoa.
and a little liquor store, and it was
Okay.
it was in it was in a rough part of town, and
Okay.
groups of us just like boombox and beer in hand going down San Pablo Avenue, which was the main thoroughfare. Ruthie's
Yeah.
was there. There was another party house a little further up. Then you had the Metalla Mansion on Carlson, but that was in El Cerrito, which was one
Sure.
town over.
Okay.
So the bus, would go up and down San Pablo, and you know, go to Hell House, and if that was not happening, then there might be something at the Carlson Metalla Mansion or
Oh
several
man.
points in between. There were parks like Kegmont, which is a place called Cragmont
Okay.
Park. That nicknamed it Kegmont
Oh
because
right.
we dragged a keg up the hill and drink until the cops came and tried to break things up.
Right.
And that's where you would see all these guys, the band members from Laws Rocket or Exodus. And again, like I talked about before, in the park across the street from, during the day,
Sure.
across the street during high school, that people would hang out. You would see them coming around handing out flyers for their show or whatnot. And it was, you know, they knew everybody and we
Yeah.
knew them, and everybody kind of knew each other, or very few degrees of separation. um and it had existed as really a scene.
Yeah.
People that came out of that scene that were like, I mean, you had Toby Rage,
Oh
I think
yeah.
we mentioned,
Yeah.
who loved Exodus and would
Yeah.
do these just awe-inspiring stage dives that just would get more and more amazing and death-defying everywhere you went. And these characters that grew, they became, if you played guitar in a band, or you were like the stage diver from hell, or you could draw a little something here, or some
Oh.
guy that knew how to make, do some work on a 4 track, to get your demo going. I
Yeah.
mean, everyone had some part to play.
Yeah.
If
I
it,
love
it
that.
makes sense, not to elevate those who didn't. It wasn't about famous. It was like, what do you bring to the scene that you know make it richer? Or
Yeah.
and it wasn't, it was like in your waking thoughts. It was just,
Yeah.
Toby was the guy that was like, he was at all the shows. He could outdrink almost anybody. He was a wild man,
Man.
and he could hold his own with Bailoff. And
Well,
Bailoff was a
there you go.
character. I mean, he wasn't like, Jeff Tate with this, operatic voice. It was the guy that would, did you hear Paul ripped a Motley Crue shirt off of this kid and made a little bracelet, with
Oh
it.
man.
I mean, it was, there were, it was so rich with characters. And
Yeah.
it's funny too, if you think about like some of the personalities of
Yeah.
these bands that are bigger than anything, like
Sure.
Testament
Yeah.
and Metallica, and James was, I mean, he was on the precipice of being almost a wallflower, shy. I mean,
Wow.
sure, he was coming up with all, being one of this aggressive band, but he came alive on stage, but off stage,
Yeah.
kind of quiet, I mean,
Wow.
and that was his personality. That's where he had grown up. Alex Skolnick, he was the youngest. He was one of the
Yeah.
youngest kids in the thing, and he was kind, he's a good student. I mean, he
Yeah.
had a very educated parents, that they expected more from him, and it was like, and he's one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet. But I mean, it's like it's just like meeting like Pee Wee Herman, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm playing with Slayer," and it's like, "Oh, okay,"
Yeah.
it doesn't equate, It's like the onstage persona doesn't match the hype or
That's
whatnot.
funny.
Where and it was wonderful to be in that, in and around these just amazing people,
Yeah.
and from a group of kids who really didn't, I don't think that they saw much more in their lives. Like, nobody thought they were gonna, live past whatever. This is the era of, like Reagan, where we were
Right.
thought nuclear war at any moment. I mean, it wasn't like so doom and gloom, but the Bay Area was kind of, a city that had passed its prime, and it was a little, it was in
Okay.
decline, so to speak. And
Oh,
the heyday of like the summer of love was
right.
clearly over.
Yeah.
And even the 70s were like, the me and the big stadium bands. So it was like, man, you want to go see Aerosmith one more time, or Journey was huge. And we liked, you appreciated it, but it wasn't our music. So it was just
Sure.
like, we got nothing. There's some kids, friends of mine, are playing down at Ruthie's. Yeah, let's go down there, and punk
Yeah.
shows. I mean, everything was like, there wasn't like this, like, oh, I can just see, Exodus on, playing the Cow Palace.
Sure.
That was just like nowhere in anybody, especially
Yeah.
Exodus. It
Sure.
wasn't. It
Yeah.
wasn't the reason why anyone was doing it, and that was our idea of
Yeah.
making it. was to
Yeah.
be as big as Judas Priest or whatever it was. So
Sure. And that's a fine goal to have. But I think you've really nailed like the beauty of like why people are so fascinated with this scene. It's just a bunch of kids who are just looking for something to do and have this sense
yeah,
of camaraderie, and they found each other and found
yeah,
this found family of fun and excitement in kind of a place that was like maybe kind of lame otherwise. So you guys had to make your own fun.
yeah, and it wasn't like one person or a few people decided to do these things.
Yeah.
It just was very organic, for not to use a hippy dippy term, but it just kind of came out of necessity. It just kind of fit together, and all the while too, there were people that bless their hearts, they didn't survive.
Sure.
I
I
mean, the
mean,
party never stopped for them, and it took them.
yeah. I
So
mean, I mean
people
that's
like Toby,
and
which
Bailoff. Yeah.
and Bailoff
Yeah.
and Yaz and Al
Yes.
Voltage. I mean, there was so many people in that scene. And Cliff,
Yeah. Yeah.
talk about. I mean, I think 28 when he was
24.
killed.
24.
24. I can't
Man.
even imagine that. Back then, we were like, he was the older guy, but to be, I mean, that we
I
talked a
mean,
little bit about Lemmy. I mean, it was
yeah.
like, but Lemmy was, had seen Fire and Rain, and Cliff had
Yeah.
just started. And,
Yeah.
we coming on the heels of like a Randy Rhodes. That was our
Yeah.
Randy. It was like
Yeah.
that was Randy Rhodes that we knew, and it
Yeah.
was like, that.
Yeah.
It was like it was unfair.
Yeah. And I want to talk about Cliff because like, what I as someone who obviously, he was gone, when I was 4 years old,
Wow.
and but the sense that I have of him is that he was this guy who was mature beyond his years and had this
Yeah,
and there's something was like just like something really special about this guy. And this is like, think of what he would have done had he gone on. I mean, 24, you're just barely become, starting life.
yeah.
I just it's a terrible tragedy. Um, and you had some interactions with him. Is that right, Mark?
I had a few. I mean, they're like I said, like the same thing I was saying. You wouldn't necessarily come across them too much. Sometimes it shows. I had friends that played in spastic children,
Oh, yes.
that I would see all the time. Uh, my friends I would see all the time, and then Cliff would be at a show, and we'd be having drinks either in the parking lot after or at the bar during, before and during or whatnot, and it was kind of more party atmosphere. I shared a joint with him one time backstage,
Yeah.
and backstage, I mean, it was like, you know, to the side of the stage at Ruthie's Inn or something.
Right, right.
We maybe had maybe 4 or 5 words between us, and it wasn't like everybody sat around going, I got to go talk to Cliff, and I
Sure.
have all these profound things I want to say because I know he's not going to be with us very much
Right,
longer, or
right.
anything like that. You really came across people from time to time, you know, Bailoff. I would go to, Hell House, and Bay was up and around, and you'd party with him, and it was like, that he was a little bit, I would say, more approachable.
Bailoff
Not
was?
that he wasn't. You would see him more often than you would see Cliff, and Cliff was
Sure.
lived in another town.
Yeah.
So, and when he came to play uh, spastic children, I saw him more during those spastic children shows than I did
Sure.
when he was playing with Metallica, because there wasn't a huge amount. He didn't. I don't think he lived at the Metallica Mansion.
Right.
That was that was James and Lars.
Yeah.
So he would be there at parties, and there weren't
Sure.
like a huge amount of parties at the Metallica Mansion because most of the time, at least where they were
Yeah.
there, because most of the time when they had that place, they were on tour. Metallica was on tour,
Oh yeah.
so Pam and Connie, who
Right.
helped take care of the house, that they would have parties, and sometimes you would see the Metallica guys, sometimes you wouldn't for
Sure.
months and months because they're on tour.
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
working. This is just where they sleep. Um, so yeah, Cliff was like you just didn't walk through thinking that you're not going to see, but he also some it goes to that as well, that if you what I was saying before about like Paul was kind of like the vanguard, same with like Toby was big
Oh
on
right.
if you were posing or came to fawn or gawk or whatever it was,
Sure.
it was like, dude, that's not what this is about. This isn't. I mean, if there were cell phones back there, I mean, it would be a whole lot of like you would not see these guys because, you know, if Harold showed up with his camera,
Sure.
they dogpile so they could dogpile for the photo. It wasn't like a selfie. It
Oh
was like,
right.
look who's on the bottom, or fucking like Rob McKillop would be
Oh.
he would get the fuzzy end of the lollipop sometimes on that. They people kind of taunted him a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit, and it was just because he was kind of shyer. I think
McKillop?
he was, yeah, he wasn't really like in your face and stuff like that. There
Sure.
were a couple of other characters like that too that
Yeah.
would shy away from going to those parties because
Sure.
it would get wild. And I was like,
Yeah.
nah, I'm not really into that. I love the
Sure.
music, I love
Yeah.
playing it, but I'll hang with you guys. But if someone starts, pulling their pants down or doing, lines on my mother's antique mirror, it's like you guys got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it was like the party's over. I'm not about that or
Right.
whatnot. But anyway, it was
Yeah.
there was some crazy, but Cliff kind of had that aura about him. I mean, he was not about putting on airs or anything like
Sure.
that. He really, and I don't know this. I just it appears to me, but he had an impact on them musically as a group,
Yeah.
but he also had an impact on them as far as how he wanted what it was all about the music, like the early photos of like James and like spandex and things like that. I mean, we all have had wardrobe misdeeds or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
malfunctions or
Yeah.
mental malfunctions to be able to wear
Yeah.
stuff like that. But Cliff was like, he's in his street clothes.
Sure.
I mean, that was his thing, and cut off sleeves and misfits
Yeah.
and bell bottom jeans. And this was at a time when nobody wore bell bottom jeans. I
Sure.
mean, your older, cousin or whatever that would take you to see, 38 Special or
Sure.
Aerosmith would have bell bottoms. But
Yeah.
no, you're not going to wear bell bottoms. But you know what? He's like, fuck you. These are my pants. I'm
See,
comfortable. I like these.
exactly. I love that. That's the right attitude to go through life with. It's like, look,
Yeah.
I do what pleases me, and it's like I'm not hurting anybody. If you got a
Yeah.
problem, fuck off. You know?
Exactly. And it was like this is not a fashion show. This
Yeah.
is this is our music. And fuck, I'm gonna wear what I wear, and I am
Yeah.
who I am. He was very nice. He
Yeah.
was very, generous when it came to at least weed. It was like, he was just he was I know friends of mine that were like played with him in Spastic, Flunky, and Fred. I
Yeah.
mean, there wasn't anything if when they started getting really big, and it was
Yeah.
like the machine of Metallica was getting bigger, where you have management, you have handlers, you have people that are like, making sure the wrong people don't get back. It's like you don't understand. The entire guest list is comprised of the wrong people, the people you don't want. And it's like, that's our group, brother. And it's
Oh
like, and
man.
Cliff was like, you know, hey, Cliff, he won't let me back there. What? Fuck you. Come on. I mean, he was just like, you don't know who this guy is, the guy that, you know, got the keg working when no one else could. No one else could, man. This guy was it. You don't understand how important he is to the organization. I mean,
Oh man.
it was that was he was one of those vanguards of the scene. So when
Oh man.
Paul left us a lot later,
Yeah.
and certainly not on the trajectory of the height that
Yeah.
was on. So,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, an important stone of that, not the scene itself, but how the scene was managed, so to speak.
Interesting.
Or maybe I should say mismanaged. But
That might be
it was
fair.
like, if you came to play around, get on down the road. I mean, it was like, we're here to have, you know, do our thing, and it's not a fashion show. It's not
Right.
let me take a picture. I mean, and he would have hated that if he had
Sure.
gotten to that level. But
Yeah.
anyway, and Cliff, that was another. At least from my perspective, what I felt like, that was, you know, one of the tribal elders has
Yeah.
left us,
Yeah.
and we are diminished by that loss.
Yeah.
The guiding lights are getting dimmer. I mean,
Yeah.
there were few to wage for, and everyone can speculate on how the band managed to continue on, and the just the I work with Jason Newstead, and
Oh, yeah.
we've been become pretty close friends, I would say. I mean, I would say that
Yeah.
he would probably say that. But I've worked with him on every project pretty much since he left Metallica,
Yeah.
doing his Newstead, the album packaging. I do his merchandise, Chop House. Anyway, he's just, and he was the right choice for that.
Sure. And
That
I've
uh,
never heard a bad story about him as a person. Like he's always seems like he's a sweet guy, real humble and just
and
a good-hearted
imagine
person.
being able to be that person, remaining that person through
Yeah.
all of that. That's
Yeah.
a that speaks volumes
Yeah.
to his
Well,
character. He's one of my
yeah.
favorite people, bar none.
Oh, I
In
love
the
that.
music, yeah, he just absolutely is. But to have to all of a sudden, because he didn't, he could never fill those shoes. Nobody could fill those shoes of Cliff,
Sure.
as far as maybe your skill set. Yeah, maybe you come closer. It's different, but being that vanguard, being that, like, Cliff always seemed to me, musically as well as maybe even a little bit groundingly, as far
Yeah.
as the wear your street clothes. We're kid,
Yeah.
we we are who we are, and we're out there doing it's all about the music. When he was gone, I don't know, they Lars and James really had to kind of pick that mantle up, and you had
Yeah.
personalities are vastly different than Cliff's, I would say,
Yeah.
as a three-pronged attack. I mean, he was a strong third, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, and a key component to
Sure.
those very important elements that all of them brought. So
Yeah.
anyway, it was a different dynamic, and for them to manage and to keep going and go higher than probably anyone could imagine,
Yeah.
which is a testament to the remaining and the newer additions.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah, he was culturally, I think he was an important key element that was removed from us
yeah.
very quickly and very
Yeah.
dramatically. Anyway, it
Yeah.
was it was it was a rough hit
Yeah. And I can only
for
imagine.
everybody.
I can only imagine. It's like, I have friends in our scene here, and some of them are in national and international touring acts, and like, yeah,
Yeah,
it would, if something happened to one of them, heaven forbid,
yep,
I would be devastated, and our scene would feel it, and so
yeah,
I feel that's fairly relatable.
yeah. It's universal.
On the Metallica note, did you see Exodus with Kirk Hammett?
I did not see Exodus with Kirk Hammett.
Okay.
Um, I actually went to high school with one of one of the early replacements, which was Evan McCaskey,
Oh, yes, I know of Evan McCaskey. Yes.
and then but no, I never saw them with Kirk.
No sweat. No
The,
sweat.
how I saw Metallica after I had seen. Is that right? Yeah, because he left. Gary took over.
Yeah. Gary's a great guy. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean it's I doubt it highly that I did.
No
I went
worries.
to a friend of mine's birthday party. This guy Peter Carter.
Okay.
He had turned 18, and it was down at the party house where the Exodus guys would hang out, and they played in his backyard,
Oh wow.
and there's a tape of it. It's Peter Carter's birthday, whatever, but
Okay.
they played in the backyard. His father like took cobbled together a bunch of like wood pallets and then
Oh
some
man.
plywood and made a stage, and they put a keg on one corner of the stage. And I remember that it was a little uneven on that side, so when they first put it on, I think Tom's kit got kind of
Oh,
tilted on one side. I mean, it was just those kind of things. But
that's pretty
I
funny.
mean, I gotta, because Peter's 3 years younger than me, and I'm just
Okay.
trying to line the dates up.
Oh,
I may
sure.
have seen him with Kirk, but I doubt it, just
Okay.
because sometime, and again, you weren't like, did you see the back then? You weren't really like who was in the band. It was just the band, Exodus.
Sure. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, Mark.
No, 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 no.
Oh,
The older I get, I will say no before I say yes to almost
sure.
anything,
Sure,
and that's
sure.
just because God forbid Paul would rise from his grave and say, "You idiot, you never saw it," you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But none of that. But
Yeah.
I don't think I did, but I definitely saw him earlier on, and definitely we were. I remember waiting endlessly for Bonded by Bud to officially come out, even
Right.
though all of us had heard the tape over and over again, play it at concerts in the parking lot and all
Yeah.
that. And anyway, but
Yeah.
no, I don't believe I saw him with Kirk.
And that's okay. On that subject, I have two Exodus questions.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite memory of Bailoff?
Ooh, I I have several. There were it's no secret that we all back then like to dabble in the methamphetamine
Yeah.
world. You
I
know,
mean, I think it was the fuel for thrash. I mean, part of it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think Phil Campbell used to call it, not Filthy Animal Taylor used to
Oh
call
yeah.
it nasal decongestants.
Ah,
We were all very, health conscious back then.
yes.
So at Hell House, I remember one time Paul lived in the attic for a short period of time. We were all downstairs and partying, and we'd hear this like just horrific squeaking noise, and we were like, "What the fuck is that?" And so a group of us ran upstairs and opened his door, and he had pushed all of his furniture to the outer perimeter of his room, and in the middle he's standing in a shopping cart that he had dragged up there, and he had this fly swatter, and he was swinging wildly trying to get. He had left his window open and a TV on, and all these gnats had come into it.
Oh,
And we're all, what are you doing? Because we couldn't see anything. He might have been just seeing these gnats because he was been up for days.
Jesus.
But this squeaking was him like moving, swatting furiously and then trying to steady himself. But the squeak of the wheels on the floor, and he's all goddamn fly fights, and he'd swing and wild, and we just closed the door and said he'll be up for another couple of days, and then he'll probably just drop. But that was one of them. But
Wow.
the other one was he used to have this dog called Bytor.
Yeah. From the
For
Rush song.
he was a huge Rush fan.
That's awesome.
In fact, a side story that was kind of interesting that uh, uh, when when Metallica got taken under the wing of Q Prime,
Oh, yes.
Cliff was a huge Rush fan,
Yeah.
and so was uh, Fred Fred Cotton, who
Oh,
sang for
oh,
Plastic Children, uh,
yes.
and I believe it was James, Cliff, and they invited Fred along to go see Rush, and they were backstage, and Cliff was just like asking Geddy Lee all these questions,
Oh my God.
and this is before Spastic Children had formed, and and I Geddy Lee had talked about how they got the band together originally,
Oh
the Rush
man.
band and all this, and it got like Cliff all excited and thinking about it, and Fred saw this as an opportunity to convince Cliff and James to join Spastic Children as a project to to flesh out their creative aspirations, and then if they find something that they like, they'll add it to Metallica. But he said he waited until he saw how like doe-eyed Cliff was with talking with Geddy Lee
Oh
to
man.
spring this idea, and Cliff immediately says, "I'll do it." Anyway, Fred told that story the other day. I was just dying, but
That's pretty funny.
but
I had a Spastic Children tape that I has is long disappeared, but yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
and they yeah, there was that was just a crazy joke,
oh my gosh.
Paul, another so Paul had this dog Bytor.
Yeah.
Uh, boy, I'm going all over the map. Um, and when Bytor passed away, Paul was just kind of bummed.
Yeah.
Uh, we didn't see Paul for a couple months after that, and then uh, Flunky, who played in Spastic, and his wife Karen, and a buddy of mine, Jumbo, who used to he sang for Spastic before Fred,
Mm-hmm.
and they kicked him out, and he started a band called Pillage Sunday,
Okay.
which were great.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
they were the Ruthie's house band on Tuesday nights or Tuesday afternoons or something like that, and it
Oh,
was like
okay.
a dollar, and they were great. But
Yeah.
anyway, they're all friends and party, with Metallica and X and all those guys. So, but Paul, so I was hanging out with Jumbo Flunky and his wife Karen at the Haight Street Fair, and out from this alleyway comes Paul, and he's got a new dog, and we're all, dude, that's not Bytor. And he goes, no, Bytor's gone, man. Bytor. And he's telling us about Bytor. And I'm like, hey, man, what's your dog's name? And he goes, just named him. His name's Level. And I go, oh, that's heavy, man. Like Level a City. And he goes, yeah, it just came to me in the parking garage. And I was just like, and I was like, oh, and I didn't want to say anything, but I was at first like Level the City. Of course, Paul named his, this dog
Yeah.
Level, and it was like he came to him in the park garage, like on level B or
I love
whatever.
that. That's
That's what they go.
hilarious.
Oh my god, that's what Paul was, man. He was so heavy, so heavy.
So heavy.
so heavy, parking garage, so heavy, made of cement. But anyway, Paul was great like that.
Oh
And
man.
there's a bunch of others. I mean, there's some of the things that I wouldn't call them my favorite because it
Sure.
was so outrageous and somebody could get hurt, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'll leave that for others.
No problem.
Those
No
are my
problem, Mark.
favorite of Paul. There was the one last one of Paul that just, I think it epitomized who Paul was. He during the when both Chuck Schuldner and Chuck Billy
Oh,
been diagnosed
yes.
with cancers. Um, there was this big Bay Area show called Thrash of the Titans,
I remember.
which was amazing and epic, and it was like kind of almost, it was the precursor, I would say, to like Murder in the Front Row, which we consider, like, for lack of a better, it's our yearbook,
Yeah.
and every page carries, of someone we knew, someone we love, someone we care, the people in the scene.
Yeah.
It's just and the Thrash of the Titans, everybody came out for that purpose, for those two guys, and it was just this huge love fest. But it was just an amazing, 24 hours of literally, like, into the wee morning hours. They
Yeah.
played for 24 hours, everybody,
Wow.
and it was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I was standing in the main hall, and I was talking with Billy Milano
Oh, Billy.
and it was somebody else. It was a friend of mine. I had gone to document it for a magazine.
Oh,
So I was
okay.
going to interview a few people. Like, I interviewed Marco Segueda, I interviewed
Nice.
Chuck, I
Nice.
interviewed Exodus for a little bit, um, Rob Flynn. There were
Oh,
a couple
nice.
of other people, and I knew these guys, so I could, I wanted to try to get some kind of, like, valid questions, not just like, but I, anyway, I asked about certain things, and I think I was going to try to ask Billy some questions. I mean, all I knew was SOD, and that was
Sure.
all I really knew. So, but I believe I was talking with him about, would he be into talking about this? And then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, Paul comes walking in,
Oh.
and he's got a babe on each arm, but it, between them, they had probably four teeth.
Oh, wow.
I mean, these women had seen some life, and
Okay.
Paul was of that cloth, and he had this big brown leather jacket on, and he walked in there with, like, a babe on each arm, like it was a red carpet and rolled out for
Oh,
the
man.
Bayloft. And you could just tell, because they asked him, he was going to sing with Exodus for this special
Oh.
event, and he came in, like, I mean, like the most trailer trash rock star. It was perfect, and he had a glow about him that you were just
Oh.
like, this just might get him back up out of whatever funk he's in or whatever.
Yeah.
Here he comes in true form with these two ladies, man. It was just like, and it was just wonderful. And
Yeah.
that, like some transaction had occurred to get them to come with him or something,
Sure,
like
sure.
somebody had a bag on them, or there was promise of money,
Yeah.
or an acting job. I don't know what, but these women came in, and it just fit a scene. And Billy and I were just standing there. I couldn't ask them it was just, our mouths were agape, and we're all, and Billy's like, Paul, baby, and Paul, I barely looked up because he was smiling so wide. He's just like, he's riding this high, and
Oh, man.
he's like, "Hey, Dave," and he kept walking. He called him Dave or something, some other name. So he goes, and Billy was like, "Did he just call me?" And I was just like, "Let him ride, baby." And
Oh,
he was
man.
floating.
Oh,
It
man.
was how I want to remember Paul. You
I
know,
love that. I love that, Mark.
oh, and he was just he was a brutal guy, but he was
Yeah.
so he was just he was this little like a he was like a stuffed Tasmanian devil that you have on your kid sister's bed that had real claws, or something.
Oh man.
Just both of those things combined. He was just so great, and you know, I he never had a problem with me
Yeah.
or other people around me. He was just
Yeah.
always just you know did you go see UFO? I told you to go see UFO or something. It's like I couldn't get all the way down to Santa Cruz. He goes, you don't care enough or something. He would
Oh
just,
man.
he was, but he'd grind your beans not like viciously, just like
Sure.
this is good for you. It's like broccoli. You got
Yeah.
to eat your broccoli. Anyway, he was just great like that. It was just so cool.
I love that. Uh, Earlier we talked a little bit about Rob McKillop, who has like fallen off the face of the earth.
Yep.
Have
Oh,
when was the last time you heard from Rob?
wow. Probably ugh, trying to think back. It's been at least 20 20 years, 18 years.
Dang.
I, he used to frequent after Exodus. I mean, he's a contractor. He's very successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got his life, and I
Sure.
don't music. I don't believe still enters his mind. Um, and again, a lot of those times for a lot of different people are bittersweet on different levels.
Sure. Sure.
I don't want to speak for him, but
Of course.
I think he fully walked away, and uh, he has his life, and he's very content with
Sure.
that.
Sure.
He used to drink at a bar that I used to go down to every once in a while. Oh God, they had the greatest roast beef sandwiches,
Okay.
Brennan's. It's no longer there. This was in the Bay Area, but it was a huge watering hole that
Sure.
lots of people would go to, lots of friends in the scene and whatnot. But it was also very close to. It's an industrial area, so there's a lot of there's a lumber yard there. There's construction sites and things of that nature. But it was a place where he would go to just kick back with his fellow workmen and stuff like that and have drinks. And this was well after Exodus. And I didn't, I knew Rob and fairly well,
Sure.
kind of well,
Yeah.
acquaintance as one would, but just no interest in discussing anything. And I didn't press anything because I
Sure.
knew he had moved on. Um, and all we talked about was like his work, construction site, and
Oh
his home
wow.
life, and it was one of those. It was a you know
He's made a total break
he's made
completely
a
from
break, and
music.
everyone respects everybody for
Sure.
whatever decisions they had to make.
Sure.
And I think the '90s were particularly rough on a lot of
Yeah.
people in and out of bands. I mean,
Sure.
so, but yeah, I mean, I would just say Rob is still a very nice guy. I think he's a nice, sweet guy, and
Good.
he's not regretful or any. I mean, again, at the time when he was no longer with
Yeah.
the band was barely a band at that point.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
Things were not easy for that band in the middle career.
yeah. I mean, Exodus has had a wonderful second act. Um, but yeah, I kind of I know the history and how things just kind of fell apart for them around 93.
Yeah.
And then like had, a couple of false starts and then now they've been cooking really since 2004. But
Oh yeah.
but it took a while for them to kind of get it going and keep that momentum going. But
Yeah, and Gary and Tom, I would say, and I mean, Jack Gibson has been with them for a very long time now,
yeah. Oh
longer
yeah.
than any of the other original members.
Yeah.
And he's a solid guy, and
Yeah.
and Lee is amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, and he's got a lot of Bay Area street credibility and he's a solid guy,
Yeah.
and that band was comprised of some very strong personalities that had some serious, uh, predilections for nasal decongestants
There
or
we
whatever you
go.
want
There
to
we
call
go.
it.
You know,
And I mean, I wouldn't want to say that the management. It's hard to it there. I people ask me about them, and I go, it's why people in the Bay Area love the Raiders. It's like it's almost
oh,
like
I get what you mean.
when they do right, it's very infrequent, but it's so sweet. But
Yeah,
most of the time, you just got to get really used to disappointment,
sure.
or it's just you still love them. They're the
Oh
home
yeah.
team,
Oh
root for
yeah.
them no matter what.
Yeah.
They've been robbed. They fought and got everything that they could get from. It's just
Yeah.
it's like they're the working man's band. They are
Oh
just
sure.
and Gary keeps it together. Tom is amazing. He's still one of
Yeah.
the most underrated drummer in the broader circles. In inner circles, everyone knows and
Oh
respects.
yeah.
I
I
remember
respect the hell out of Tom. He's great.
oh
Fantastic.
and lots of industry people just I mean just are just he's a solid drummer, one of the best.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, and Gary is seemingly the Energizer Bunny, man.
Yeah.
He's got more aches and pains probably than he's
Sure.
ever had before, but
Yeah.
he, doing double duty between Slayer and Exodus. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
like, oh, you ran the marathon? Yeah, in about 45 minutes, you got to run another one. It's
yeah.
like
Yeah.
Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
amazing,
Yeah.
and he is just he's a great guy too.
I agree.
I
So glad I've got to meet Gary. It was about 20 years ago, but he is a
of course,
terrific guy, you know. Uh
and I'm so glad that uh, he's been able to right the ship, so to
yeah.
speak. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and yeah, and yeah. Anyway, he's good people, and he's obviously recognized. I mean, for Slayer to,
Yeah.
and it's not just stopped at Slayer. I mean, Kerry King, he draws in Phil Demmel and Marcos Agueda.
Oh
So
yeah.
I mean,
You know.
the Bay Area really did make an impression on Slayer,
Oh yeah. You
and
know.
affected how they recognize it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like Hanneman goes, there's no other choice. And even that was tough for them. But
Sure. But
there
Gary
is
Gary
no
had to
other choice.
Gary had to been
Gary is
the
the
one.
man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh
same with Metallica. Who do they have as their ringer for Mustaine? The
Kirk.
Exodus guy, Kirk.
Exactly, you know.
And
Uh
that's what was so great about that movie is that it was a movie about how central and key Kirk was to the scene. I mean,
oh yeah. I mean
if he
like
hadn't started Exodus, I mean, God knows there would,
well, I mean and here's the thing, if he hadn't taught Gary guitar, we wouldn't be
yeah,
talking about Exodus at all.
at all. Yeah,
At all. You
yeah.
know.
It would be
Um
the Evan McCaskey project,
oh my
or
gosh, right.
who
Uh
knows? But
yeah.
so that
Um so I wanted to ask about Rick and Lonnie Hunolt.
yeah,
Do you have any adventures with those characters? Rick, obviously, guitarist in Exodus, and Lonnie being his brother on the Slate team.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, Rick Rick had me paint his jacket early on, back
yeah.
when he had just joined Exodus, and Exodus, their logo was the X was actually like this strange X shaped, and it had a guitar
Yeah.
coming out of it. And he had me paint that on the back of his, I think it was a leather vest or something.
Hmm.
But he had written all this stuff he wanted, and he saw me in the park, and I had done somebody else's jacket or done a flyer or whatever. But anyway, he had me do some stuff. That's where I first met Rick, and I just thought Rick was like he just had this the face of somebody that was like, I mean, the shot of him on the back of Bonded by Blood, he's just like, he's always like supercharged, and
Yeah.
it was go fast, I mean,
Yeah.
he was so bubbly, and he was so just uh, one of the nicest guys. He's enthusiastic to the nines. I mean, he was
Sure.
always just like, have you heard this, this band, Holocaust? And he's, oh, fuck, Holocaust. And he would just,
Yeah.
and he was always amped up, and he was just so full of, and
Oh,
Lonnie was this big, I mean, big tough guy. He was had a construction business. I
okay.
think he worked for his father's construction business.
Okay.
Big guy, and he hung out with some of the friends of mine that I had met up on this Telegraph Avenue, which had a bunch of pinball joints and pizza and bars and record stores. I mean, it was like our little playground up there. And Lonnie would hang out up there. And I don't even think I put it together that he was brothers with Rick until like
Oh,
I think Rick came up and hung out with like Lonnie and all the friends. It seemed like two separate worlds, but everything was connected somehow. Like
yeah.
you would go up to Telegraph, and there would be like Lars would be coming out of Tower Records because he just got the new Kerrang.
Sure.
Uh, uh, the, you know, oh geez, like Alex Skolnick would come up and buy records,
Yeah.
or the Laws Rocket guys just got out of Fat Slice with a slice of pizza, or they were all going to go up to Cheapskate Hill behind the Greek Theater and watch a football game or watch a show
Oh,
or sneak into a show or whatever.
sure.
But
Yeah.
everybody kind of came up through there because there was a lot of things when shows weren't happening.
Interesting.
You go play pinball just to hang out. It was a hangout
Yeah.
area in the East Bay. So, and I would hang out with guys that could go score uh 12 packs for us, and we'd go down to the park and drink. And Lonnie was in the crowd that would have beers with us or whatever. We talk about it. And then like Rick showed up a couple times, and it was like, oh, of course, you guys are brothers, you look exactly the same. It's just
Right.
Rick is all spindly and excited, and Lonnie's like, hey, what's up, man? He was
Yeah.
just so cool. But
Right on.
uh, uh Lonnie was just kind of like, an older, bigger kid that was kind of like looking out for some of the younger little metalheads like myself and a
I
couple of the
love
younger.
that.
Yeah, I mean, those guys were enlisted as the sleigh team to really keep people from jumping on the stage, but jumping on the stage if they didn't know you. Like
Ah.
they really knew who was there to, like, if Toby came up and was climbing on the stage, you know,
Yeah.
they'd move aside and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, just be careful if Paul's got a longer patch cord or something today or
Sure.
something." What I
Yeah.
mean, it was like, but but people that came up to do damage or knock into their gear or whatever,
Yeah.
good intentions, bad intentions, doesn't matter. You got bowled back.
Okay.
Um, and but while we were up front and they were like guarding the stage, they'd also kind of keep an eye out on smaller ones that were like getting in trouble, or if somebody was
Yeah.
picking on somebody, they were
Yeah.
like, hey, they'd jump in and separate the two.
I think that's
You know,
great. You got to have
yeah,
guys like that. That's
and it,
awesome.
and it wasn't like planned or
Sure.
organized, or they didn't have meetings, or no jackets. Like Andy Anderson, who I talk to
Oh,
all
yeah.
the time,
Yeah.
and I adore him. He's a really nice guy, and he was part of that. But he was like one of the smallest guys, but he was tough as nails. But
Yeah.
it was like nobody. It's just like if you made your way up there, you were part of the sleigh team. I don't know. I mean, it was like
Okay.
they just kind of did it, and I'm sure
Okay.
Lonnie was doing it to protect his brother's
Yeah.
gear or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume, but never really asked. It's just, that the interaction was just like, oh, of course they're up there. I
Oh,
don't,
so
yeah,
it's just an organic kind of thing. I love that.
it, it,
Um,
it seemed to me, I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, that's
Yeah.
my impression because, I never saw them go after any of the people that I knew that we were in the crowd doing.
Yeah.
But then again, we knew not to, you know, Toby was going to stage dive,
Oh,
and
sure.
and it was respectful, and he never like knocked things over. He was careful, and
Yeah.
he did it, and it was amazing, and it added to the ob. But then other people would climb up there, and it was like, no, off. You're not going to do it because
Oh
you don't know what
man.
you're doing. We've got our stage diver or stage divers because Andy used to do some pretty amazing. They nicknamed Andy Airborne Anderson.
Oh man.
So, and there's a lot of shots at like the day on the dirt with him
Yeah.
flying over the crowd.
The perfect thing, like, why don't we talk about the day on the dirt? You were there.
Sure. Yep.
1984. Wes
$5.
Anderson, $5. Wes Anderson's,
$5.
or excuse me, Wes Robinson's answer
Robinsons.
to Bill Graham's Day on the Green, the
Pretty
thrash
much.
metal equivalent.
Yeah.
Suicidal, Exodus, Slayer, Blue Cheer.
Yep.
Uh,
Apparently, I didn't get there in time to see Blue Cheer. I
oh
left.
man.
Well, I mean, I got there later,
Yeah.
or I didn't watch it. I can't remember, but I
Yeah.
mean, but
I saw Blue Cheer in 2008, but
uh,
uh, RIP Dickie Peterson. But
um,
yeah,
great band. But
great
yeah, it was
band.
an odd pairing. I didn't know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
to have those three on the back of a flatbed truck playing to about, I don't know, about 125 of us just running around on this lawn,
Oh man.
it was amazing.
Oh,
Um, there was some guy, he didn't want to pay the $5. I can't remember if we knew him or not, but so Aquatic Park was in between the highway 80,
mm-hmm.
and then there was this estuary that separated the park from the freeway.
Yeah.
But you could walk down University Avenue and get onto the highway and walk along the highway, and then jump the guardrail,
Yeah.
get across the estuary to get onto the shore. But that was the only way to get in for free. And some guy did that, but you needed to. The estuary was really just like a big, runway for sewage that goes
Ugh.
along the freeway. It was not and bay water mixed with it. It was
Ugh.
nasty.
Yeah.
And he had gotten some guy had gotten an inner tube and he was coming across.
Oh.
I guess he was drunk and he
Oh.
fell in. So
Ooh.
we used to joke because he came into the crowd and we're standing there watching Exodus play, and this guy stunk. Everybody wanted to get the hell away from him because he was just drenched in the sewage smell.
Oh.
It was
Oh.
really nasty. And we used to joke that, yeah, that guy he was the inventor of the mosh pit because everyone tried to get away from him. So the
Jesus.
pit formed around him because no one
Oh
wanted to get
man.
near him. But yeah, that was a great that was that was just one of those things that's like $5 and you went down there and you saw these three great bands. I remember I was on facing the stage. I was on the left and I was on the in the kind of on the perimeter of the pit, and I could see the side of the stage, and Exodus was playing, and the Suicidal guys, which they hadn't played with them before, or
Oh,
really,
okay.
they didn't really know. I don't believe they knew each other. And these guys came up from LA, and they were, I mean, they had the bandanas over the. I mean, they would look tough.
Sure.
And one of them, I guess they were anxious or they were messing with them or whatever it was. But one of the Suicidal guys was grabbing Tom's hi hat,
Uh-oh.
shaking it back and forth, going, "Get off, get off. We want to play. We want to play." But then they started watching and saw the crowd getting ramped up and
Yeah.
having a great time. And then apparently after that show, they were all hanging out back, and there's great pictures of them hanging out behind a U-Haul and their
Oh yeah, I've seen some of
or
those. Yeah.
whatnot. that may or may not have been the case. They might have just been playing around, goofing around. But
Sure.
I remember distinctly watching that guy shake. Tom's like playing, and he was like looking around and
Oh
looking
man.
back at Paul. And anyway, but
Oh
it could have
man.
been a joke. But
Don't
I,
know.
but anyway, it was. I mean, it was just one of those things. It was in the daytime for the most part. So, and it wasn't. I think Slayer played when Slayer got on. It had started getting dark, and they actually uh, had cars pull around and turn on their headlights. So
Oh
they played
jeez.
because there was no. I mean, it's literally a flatbed truck, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
and a PA that they had put on it with a car battery or some kind of deal, but
Yeah.
it was very lo-fi. It was not
Sure.
made for uh, for a concert.
Sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So the I remember the headlights going on for them, and it was unique and it was wild, but it was like um it was I think it was the for me it was the the venue that was chosen that made it like unique and the pairing. But
Sure.
I mean, it's literally right across from a open freeway where there's no barriers. So
Wow.
sound wise, you're not talking soundboard quality.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you got to hear everything, but it was an event, and you were there with your friends, and we were all hanging out, and some of those photos in like Murder in the Front Row are just amazing.
Oh
There's
man.
one I found like years later. I found this picture in the book, and it's like somebody Hanneman sitting in the front cab of a truck, and the door is open, and through the window of the door that's rolled down, you can see a group of guys standing on a hill looking down in, which I believe is down toward looking towards the stage, but they're wearing their Levi's vests and stuff like that. And I used to paint, and
Oh,
two guys, and there one's got an Eddie that I painted, the other one's got like an almost finished Screaming for Vengeance that I had started on.
nice.
But I'm just sitting there, and nobody knows it from Adam, and no one's going to know or care, and that's the way it should be. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, I forgot about that, I remember those pieces, but that's like we're talking, 45 years ago. You
That's
know what I
great
mean?
though. That's
It's like
wonderful.
it's just one of those things. That's why I look at this book is like it's made an impression on these people.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre from the people that I know,
Yeah.
and we talk about it, and it's just like, you know, you never did finish that jacket. And it's like, dude, you're in a book that's like everybody around the world is like looking at this book, and
Yeah.
watching Slayer, and you're in the book more than, Hetfield is or something. And it's just like, yeah, but you didn't finish that jacket. That really pissed me off. I think I paid you in advance. It's just stuff like that that you just go
Sure.
like, that's what it was about.
I love
It's not
that.
about who's got a limo or who's
Yeah.
got a bank account. It's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
fucking I Zetro
Oh, yeah.
a long time ago. He had me paint a Motorhead on the back of his jacket,
Nice.
except he wasn't too cool about it at the end. He was kind of getting, he got a little bit of an attitude with me, and he was just like,
Oh,
F you, I'm not paying you. And I was just like, what? And then like, and I think some of the other guys were like, dude, that's fucked up. And he's like, yeah, well, F him or whatever. I mean, and this is like 100 years ago.
sure.
So like, of course, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm like, first I'm like, man, that's fucked up and whatever. But he's walking around with them, and I'm telling everybody I painted that,
Yeah.
and anyway, and then like years later, he comes over to the houses. He's got some band with his sons,
Oh, yeah. Hatriot.
Patriot. So I did
Yeah.
their logo,
Oh.
and I did like the first two album covers for
Oh,
them. And
yes.
anyway, just you know, and every time I gave him an invoice for it, I added $20. And he was just, well, why is it $720 for this? Or why is it, $1,420? And I'm like, oh, it's just worked out that way, I'm just trying to recoup from like past past jobs or whatever. And he's just like, what? Oh man, he did, or whatever. I mean,
Oh,
it's all just fun and games, It's just
yeah. I love that. That's fun though.
yeah,
And you get to razz them about it on Wednesday when we see Exodus.
exactly, yeah.
Yes. Um, on that subject with Zetro, what was kind of the vibe or the feeling when, he left Legacy to join Exodus, and Legacy has this new frontman that we don't know. What, what do you recall the feeling? The I don't have the
Well,
word for it.
no, I mean I think vibe is good. For me at that point, I mean I helped out with a few things here or there, but I wasn't like intimately involved with the business dealings of theirs
Oh,
to the
sure.
point where and again he left after I think because I only went to school with Alex for 1 year because he was
Okay.
at Berkeley High for 1 year only.
Okay.
Then he moved on to another school. I think he went to St. Mary's or somewhere.
Okay.
But so my connection with them was I'd see him at shows maybe here or there,
Oh,
and it
okay.
wasn't like they were necessarily calling me for anything at that
Sure.
point.
Sure.
Um, and Zetro, I know for a fact, was really kind of the glue that kept that band together as far as like he was kind of a taskmaster about,
Okay.
hey, it costs this amount for the rehearsal space. I need $20 from each of you. So you go, if you don't have it, and you go ask your folks for it. Or if I
Yeah.
have to ask your folks for it, you don't want that,
Right.
but he got them to rehearsal. And,
Yeah. Wow,
he,
that's really important. And you got to have
it
people
is
like that.
important. And yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and I do respect that,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they did too, even though they did bring a lot to it. But he really took the mantle of being he was the oldest of the
Sure.
band. Um, and I think Zetro actually recommended Chuck. So as
Yeah.
far as that was concerned, I mean, all I know is historically from what I've heard from other people and what they've said was that it was a little like we had no idea what to expect. But
Sure.
Chuck kind of had this reputation for being part of the Dublin Death Patrol,
Mm.
which was a group of people from the town of Dublin who would go to shows, and they were, for lack of a better term, like a gang,
Sure.
but it was all, just they show up together, and it was like, they were a little clique,
Yeah.
there were, there were rumors like Chuck would, when he was with Guilt, and I could say I saw Guilt once,
Okay.
and they didn't do what they said Chuck was rumored to have, that he was this big tough guy who would stand on the side on the front of the stage and smash bottles over his own head, that he was that tough, and he was just like this, but
Okay.
he was a big guy.
Sure.
They come to shows, you're not going to mess around with people you don't know that are big,
Right.
that travel in packs, but they
Right.
didn't start trouble.
Sure.
They were there to see the show, and a lot of,
Sure.
and Zetro was part of that kind of clique group.
Yeah.
He was from Dublin, so it, for the group of us who would go see the shows, it wasn't like, it didn't seem like it was dramatic for Kirk to leave Exodus and join Metallica. A
Yeah.
lot of people thought, "Oh my God, they just cherry picked, the founder for Exodus, and what's
Yeah.
that mean for Exodus?"
Sure.
Well, there was a lot more talk about that transaction.
Sure. Sure. And that
Um,
that makes sense.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, and Chuck wound up being a perfect fit, you
Yeah.
know, um, and and turned out to be a fantastic singer.
Yeah.
Oh, you wouldn't know it from the Guilt song.
Sure. I mean, it's
It's
all
a
right.
different style. So
Yeah.
you're like that in Testament, but not many people at the time had heard even the Guilt song, let alone seen Guilt. So they just
Sure.
knew mostly, I believe, knew mostly about him as part of this Dublin Death Patrol, and a lot of us, you know, it, people were coming like Exodus. I mean, that was a revolving door of people coming in and out for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least as guitarists and things like that, and there was some shakeups, and different bands. Just, I mean, I think people thought too that you're in a band, and if you haven't made it in a couple years, you got to sit there and think about next steps.
Right.
And every band is different, and everybody's got different obligations. I mean, if you think about Legacy, it was like you probably thought that there was a higher likelihood of Alex Skolnick being forbidden to go play with the band from his parents than
Sure.
the singer leaving and then getting another singer. If the singer had left and they said we're breaking up, then it would be just that's it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people recognize the fact that you just got to kind of keep continuing on if that's your main. And
Sure.
a lot of people did have that kind of like, nah, we're going to keep going. This is a big hit, but other bands have kept going and risen, uh,
Sure.
and I think that was a well, no pun intended, a testament to their um, uh, dedication to continuing on.
I gotcha. I gotta say also, Alex and Eric
These
are
things
like,
happened all
oh,
within a very short period of time too.
sure.
So it wasn't the internet, and there wasn't,
Yeah.
it's like I wouldn't find things out until I like hung up on Telegraph, and that somebody would have said something about something. Sometimes you would find out that the band had broken up, gotten a new singer, and got back together, and now they were playing again, and you would have missed all that interaction because it happened within a 2-week period, and you
Wow.
just were at school, and
Right.
that weekend you had a final, so you had to study through the weekend, so you missed the show, so you didn't
Uh,
talk to anybody, and then you would just, hey,
yeah.
what the, you know
Yeah.
there was a time uh I finally made it to England in
Oh.
86, 87, and a friend of mine he was playing bass for this band called Jet Boy, and they
Oh.
were gonna, and his name's Todd Carew,
Mm-hmm.
and I was painting his house. I was a house painter at that time, and I was painting his house, and he shows up with Slash because they're going to go on tour together. Jet Boy was opening for Guns N' Roses, and he said, "Hey," I told him, "Hey, I'm finally going to go to England. My folks got me a ticket to go to England," and he goes, "We're playing with Guns N' Roses at the Marquee," and Slash was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome," and it was in about a month or a month and a half from then, and I was like, "Fuck, I'm gonna go see my buddy play in a band and open for Guns N' Roses." And this was like Appetite for Destruction had just come out, so I had,
Sure.
but you didn't know that they were going to become this huge thing. So
Yeah.
so I was like, I got a plan. I go about my business, and I go to England, and I go to the Marquee, and I'm pretty wasted, but I'm going in, and the band gets on, and it's not Jet Boy, and I'm like, what happened? And it's this other band, I think Little Caesar or somebody.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I kind of remember them.
So I'm like, what the fuck? And then Guns N' Roses play, and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. That was cool. And I fly back home, and go back to I go. you know, a couple days later, I go back to the job site and I'm painting the house, and his mom is there and she's crying, and I'm like, what's
Oh,
up? And I'm like, Todd OD'd in New
oh,
York, like 3 days before he was supposed to fly,
oh,
and he was hanging with the band. I guess they were playing in New York or something, and he OD'd in Slash's apartment.
oh,
So anyway, but again, it was like this. There's no internet or,
sure.
and it's just like you find these things out, and you're just like, how does your world,
Yeah,
like when Cliff died, I mean, it was in all the magazines. They had these full page, blackened ads that Anthrax had put out, and it was just. But it was very carrier pigeon at that time. So
sure,
when you're asking about like what was the vibe when it's like I probably missed it. I don't know.
sure. And
All of a
that's
sudden,
and that's
yeah,
totally
Chuck
fair.
Billy's singing now, and you're like,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
really. And the bands you saw probably 4 or 5 times maximum. So
sure.
changing singers or guitarists was kind of like, well, that was 4 months ago or whatever. Maybe
Right.
they're gonna go to school and become a dentist. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. So, on the subject of like, the spread of information, how vital was Ron Quintana and Rampage Radio, KUSF, and his zine Metal Mania in that regard?
I mean, very vital. I mean, Ron definitely had his pulse on on the one big facet of the metal world. I mean, he went to Europe to go to these festivals. He
Oh,
went hung
wow.
out with Motor. I mean, he was he was one of the, and again, the personality of a lot of the personalities of a lot of these people were just like most approachable, kindest,
Sure.
generous with information. I mean, he would be excited to talk to you about whatever, and it wasn't like weird excited. It was just like, you like this, you'll love this. I mean, it was
Oh,
like, you put the pieces together. He was a great like metal thrash camp counselor kind of guy.
oh, I
I
love
mean,
that. I love
yeah,
that.
and
And my
he
impression of him, he seems like a fun guy. Nice guy.
fun guy. He kept it, you know, another I would say another vanguard kind
Yeah.
of the scene, but not
Yeah.
with like any heavy hand or anything. It was more with
Sure.
like keeping it fun and not so serious, but you seriously like the music,
Yeah.
but everything else don't take so seriously,
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sorry to say, boys and girls, Venom really can't play their instrument. So it may be the heaviest thing you've ever heard, but those
Yeah.
guys are really not very good musicians.
Oh
And
yeah.
at the
And this
time,
and the
and
secret's out now about Venom. It's like we love them while acknowledging that they're crap. You
yeah,
know, that they really couldn't play. They were metal's answer to the Monkees, you
yeah,
know. But like the Monkees, they were wonderful and they were
yeah,
important and they gave us something. They brought us something. They were an important link in the chain,
yeah.
you know.
I would say the radio station for Ron it was a good source, but I mean, you also kind of it wasn't very formal. If you
Sure.
listen to the old shows, I mean, it was like El Duce would drop in, and
Oh
anybody
God.
could drop in. I was invited a couple of times. Andy
Yeah.
Anderson was in there, and it was again feeding time on Monkey Island
Oh
because it
God.
was like everyone's drunk or stoned or whatever.
Jesus.
They're playing records that they want to hear, or they're playing something that's a goof on something, then they're
Yeah.
making up skits and they're talking. So as far as like serious news and keeping the information flowing, yeah, sure, but it's like El Duce, making some kind of wild drink out of some poor unsuspecting woman's underpants or
Oh
something.
my
Yeah, I
God.
mean, it was just like it wasn't the news you choose. It was just like, you know what I mean. It was like, go out and
Oh
make
man.
some of your own, man. It
Oh
was just
man.
but he was great, and you would see him, at shows or parties,
Yeah.
and just what are you listening to now? What's got your ear, and
Yeah.
some of the record stores like Record Vault,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
then there was the Record Exchange,
Right.
I believe in Walnut Creek, Concord, somewhere over there. Uh, I mean, yeah, and for us, it was like the European magazines,
Oh,
you know,
like Art Shock and
Kerrang,
stuff? Kerrang?
Sound. Yeah, before Art Shock and that kind of stuff. I mean, there were
Oh,
Kerrang and Sounds and NME, and you
Metal
would hear,
Forces, probably.
maybe a little later. I mean, again,
No problem.
it was like Tower Records
Oh, right.
was the place that you could get those and see
Yeah,
them. And you know, it was a library. You go in there and read it, you know, because you couldn't afford it. It was like
sure.
$5 for a magazine. You're like, what?
Jesus.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, it was like because
Oof.
it's import, you know.
Yeah, of course.
But you would get information and you would see things, and then also too going into the record stores, you know, you tried your hardest to do research about stuff, but again, you know, you'd get a Kerrang that's a month old
Yeah,
and you either already knew about it or you listened to it at somebody's house and you're like, that sucks. You know, I don't like that. It just because opinions are, you know, like
oh
assholes.
yeah,
Everyone's got one and no
yeah,
one's their stink. So sometimes it was like, oh, you learned about something from that. But for us, I mean, a lot of it was tape trading, demos, um, going to see bands, and hearing from people like Ron Quintana or him
yeah,
playing something on Rampage Radio
yeah.
or KUSF Rampage. Calex was another. They
Oh
didn't play a
right.
lot of metal, but they played a lot of punk.
Oh okay.
And like I said, our crowd listened to a lot of everything, mostly
Nice.
punk and metal mostly,
Nice.
and then the Bay Area just had, you know, you had all these other influences of bands that were coming up, like Primus, and they were
Sure.
friends with everybody. And Primus had Larry Lawton, who was another, you know, young kid at the
Yeah.
time, and just, I mean, to be in those two bands and the success and the notoriety that Possessed has,
Oh yeah.
uh, and had with him as starting, and then Primus just like taking it to new levels. It
Yeah.
was all it was all kind of respected, and then crossover came, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh my god, you had suicidal tendencies, DRI, all kinds of, and then you had your, you know, raw power, the splatter, you know,
Oh wow. Yeah.
Fuse and all these guys. I mean, it was so rich with the, I saw Cro-Mags open for Motorhead
Wow.
on Best Wishes, and it was like
Oh
just mind blowing. And that
yeah.
album, I mean, it was a game changer for me. And same with
Oh yeah.
how can I laugh tomorrow? I can't even smile today.
Yeah.
Um, there's just this so much great, uh, just an amalgamation of all the different little elements. But the Bay Area, just like you'd go see Primus one day or Fishbone, or and then you'd go see, you know, Metallica or uh, you know, Stone Vengeance and
Oh
Sacrilege,
man.
and then you'd go see Violent Coercion or Attitude Adjustment or Fang and Verbal Abuse. I mean, and it was all, you know, all intermixed, and it just it kind of just kept weaving in and out where you, I mean, you could go broke trying to
Sure.
see every, I mean, there were shows almost every night and great shows.
Yeah.
I just thought
Wow.
that, you know, there was so much to see. And I had one of my one of my best friends growing up, this woman Sarah. She was a couple of years younger than I was. She was kind of from the punk scene. Her her brothers would take her to, and all her friends that were all in Fang and Verbal Abuse and stuff like that, they would take us to shows, and like up on uh, Broadway, where you had the Stone, the Mabuhay, and Rock
Yeah.
on Broadway, and we'd known enough people that were in bands that were on all these different bills, and we both, I mean, it was like we couldn't get enough, and it was like we're gonna go see the opening band, the punk band on this bill, run across the street, get
Oh
in to
my
go
gosh.
see the middle bill band for this, and then go back over for another punk, and
Oh
then
my
there's a
gosh.
funk thing down the street. I mean, we
Wow.
just that's what we do every when we had the people that we knew, and after a while we started to get to know enough people that we could get in here or get snuck in backstage through there to go
Yeah.
see the show, part of the
Oh,
show.
oh
Once we
man.
start, it's okay to come in, and then you start working for bands, and I would
Oh man.
roadie and carry gear in, and then I would just like, uh, you know, we used to like back when you're the opening band, you usually get like a 6 pack.
Yeah, yeah.
So we used to take the guitars out, carry them in without cases, and then I'd go back to the truck and dump about 2 cases of beer in the empty guitar cases and bring them in like they were guitar. I mean, you figured your way around these things, but it
That's
was
fun.
it was funny. I think we had one time I was with Ruffians or something,
Oh yeah.
and the I think one of the manager or whatever of the manager for the night was came into the backstage, and there was like, I mean, beers everywhere, and they're all, "You're the opening. Where did I?" And it was just, I mean, it was like, "Oh, we've been buying them from the bar," and he would go check, and it was like nobody bought anything.
Shit.
Then it was like, what can you do? It was already done, and they're
Oh
drunk back
man.
on. So anyway,
That
it was fun though. I mean, you figured your way around everything. I mean,
sure.
I do.
I love that. And the that's American ingenuity at work, man.
Yes,
Uh
exactly. We're proudly flying the flag.
there you go.
Alcoholics Unanimous.
Yeah. Oh my God. So I did have one more event that I wanted to ask you about, and I want to thank you also. You've been so generous with your time, Mark.
Oh, thank you. Back in the day, you would have run out of tape long ago.
That's true.
The
Uh,
hook would have come out, taken me out.
but I wanted to ask about, and I wanted to wrap with this story. I want to ask you about the triumphant Day on the Green of 1985 with Metallica,
Yeah.
Scorpions, and Yngwie. Can you tell me about that day and that show?
Sure. I mean, number one, most of the my crowd and people that I grew up with, and the some of the older guy, a lot of the older guys and gals that were in our scene, we had grown up with the Day on the Green as kind of like a Bay Area institution. It was one of those things that we always look forward to during the summertime. Um, it was a mid-range price ticket. It was a little pricier but you got a lot of bang for your buck.
Sure.
And to see some of the bands that we got to see during some of those. I mean, I was younger, so I missed the Day on the Green with Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest, and Mahogany Rush.
Whoa.
So I mean, those are like, and your UFO and
Yeah.
Ozzy opening and the
Holy
AC/DC
shit.
Van Halen ones.
Wow.
Those are things that are like, I was just a couple years too short to get to
Yeah.
that. Anyway, so the Day on the Green for the Bay Area, for us in the Bay Area, was like an institution,
Oh man.
and it was just like, here was, I mean, it wasn't going to be Exodus or anything, and
Sure.
thank God, that Cliff had that gravitas to be able to essentially uproot um, Metallica from being an LA band and made them a Bay Area band. And here it
Yeah.
was, guys that we, were rubbing elbows with in a keg party, or listening, like, listening to a Warlock album because they're about to go over to Europe and play with Warlock. And
Wow.
James sat me down at Paul's house one time, and he was like, "Dude, you got to hear this." And he put on the Warlock Burning the Witches album, and I was just like, "Yep, okay, I like it." and went out and bought it, and then they went and played with them. But anyway,
Wow.
um, so here was these guys that we were associated with, we knew
Yeah.
that they were local and they were welcomed by all the Bay Area. They were a Bay Area band at that point.
Yeah.
And here it is, they are playing on in this place. This, it's not holy, but it's like it's very important to the Bay
Sure.
Area.
Yeah.
And it's like, what an accomplishment. And and we knew in our heart of hearts, our crowd,
Yeah.
their placement on the bill was like, we're going to give them a shot, but they're not at that level to be on the top.
Sure.
But we knew from those few shows that we had seen that everybody else that thought like that in that venue and the promoters and whoever were about to be surprised. And it's almost like this group clairvoyance where I mean, because like I was explaining about that show, seeing them in the club, and then
Yeah.
you saw them New Year's Eve, at the end of Ride the Lightning,
Yeah.
that they had it, and if they could prove it to everyone around us
Yeah.
that were not necessarily aware or believers, this was their opportunity to do it, and we had a front row seat to see that transition. And it was like, here was, the underdog getting handed the baton and
Oh
fucking
man.
running it in for the first play. I mean, and it was amazing. There,
Oh,
I had been to about 4 or 5 down the greens prior to that,
yeah.
and I was like, "There's going to be a pit," and everybody that I knew there was going to be a pit, but we were trying to imagine the pits that we had experienced, but multiplied by 100 in
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
And we were like, there's going to be like a mushroom cloud over the Oakland Stadium.
Wow.
We were trying to figure it out. It was like, but it happened. And it was the biggest thing we'd ever seen. And they killed it.
Oh,
And it was just like, it, this group vindication, this group, like, yes, you were right. It was kind of like, that's, and then all of a sudden, those guys they couldn't walk down the street without being chased down, or
oh man.
being recognized. It was like, and for them, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but for us, it felt like that it it had
This is
just
the
been
turning point.
10. This is the turning point.
Wow.
This is like someone flipped over the pancake and it's perfect. And
Wow.
it's going to be right. I mean, it was just so epic, and and to hear a crowd magnified so exponentially to the same thing that maybe 100, 200, 300 voices were shouting before. I mean, maybe 1,000 or whatever
Sure.
at some of
Yeah.
these other venues, but it was like the roar of that crowd in appreciation for what they were witnessing was like, this is it, baby. They are on their way. And it was just, it and the Scorpions were great.
Yeah.
And I could give two craps
Okay.
about Rat and all the other bands. You know
Oh,
what?
we're rat on that? I didn't even know. Okay.
Yeah, Rat headlined over them.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that they headlined. I thought Scorpions
Y&T
had. My mistake.
opened, and then I think Y&T opened. Rising, Ingrid Malmsteen's Rising Force, Victory, Rising Force. And I think it was Y&T, Metallica, Rat, and then Scorpions. I
Oh,
could
okay.
be flipping it though.
Okay.
Y&T could have been after. I got to look at it at the thing, but I mean
Okay.
they were pretty low on the bill. I think they were third. That's right, because
Okay.
it was broad. So I think after Metallica it was Y&T, then
Oh
Rat, and then
man.
Scorpions.
Poor Y&T to
Oh
have to
God, yeah.
follow, right?
And
I
on
mean,
that album, it was not,
yeah,
yeah, with the, I think it was the either Down for the Count or the Rock or the
the
Rock
robot, the summertime
Robot.
girls. Yeah, yeah,
I'd say,
yeah,
yeah, it was the robot. That's right.
yeah,
Anyway, but
yeah,
what can you do? And it was
right.
like at that point, it was like, yeah, maybe the Scorpions should play, but you know, after that, I mean, they dropped the mic. You know, it was like game
Wow.
over, boys. Follow
Wow.
that. And then a couple years later, you know, the Monsters of Rock,
Yeah.
and here it was again, kind of middle bill, but you know what? Drop the mic, you know, guys.
Yeah. Poor
Recognize.
Dokken having to follow Metallica. And and Dokken is great, but
Yeah,
like, but I would never want to have to follow, you know.
no.
Yeah.
But
Uh
having that event in '85, that was that yeah, that was a turning point. That was definitely like, guys, I think we're witness to something, and that was Cliff too. So
yeah, yeah.
that was like,
I'm glad
but
that he got to have that moment. You know what I mean?
and everybody for Kirk and for Cliff, because nobody
Yeah.
again knew that Cliff was going to pass. You know, I mean
Oh, of
that,
course.
but
Yeah.
for Kirk and Cliff to be on that stage in the Bay Area. They grew up in the
Yeah.
Bay Area, going to
Yeah.
those shows. So I mean, for them to be on that stage, and not only just to be on that stage, the opportunity, but to
Yeah.
dominate the whole damn thing was
Yeah.
like, man, it would that to be in their shoes for that moment, to feel what they felt,
Oh,
must have been just like, you know what, you could
like standing on the
pinnacle.
moon.
Yeah, to the moon, baby.
Man,
So, and
that's
I,
incredible.
I may wax poetic about it, or be a little overly romantic about it, but there's a feeling of the Bay Area group that we were just more happy for them. You
I
know,
love that. Uh,
you gotta go. You guys stuck with it, and it wasn't like, you know, it's just those kind of things are just, you really did have a feeling of ownership of being part of something,
oh
and
man.
to, and you know, you kind of feel not necessarily like responsible, but you were, you know, you were a believer when there
Yeah.
were very few. You know, you trusted your instincts. There was something about this music that you just could not get enough of. And at the time it was very different for the out, you know, people looked down on that stuff, and it was not,
Sure.
they just thought it was noise and whatever.
Sure.
But you know, anyway, that show really, that was probably, I would say, two, prior to Cliff's passing, that's where I feel like they topped out. Like,
Sure. That was the peak.
I mean, that was a huge jump from where they were just at,
Sure.
and and they wouldn't achieve a higher, really a higher peak until after Cliff's passing, which
Yeah.
makes me feel like, I mean, they were still, I mean, getting better, and all that, and just, you know, epic things to come, but
Yeah.
not a step that dramatic. Uh,
Yeah.
I felt like some after that, it was all kind of like, okay, it's hard to top it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
At least for the Bay Area, I'm sure playing Madison Square Garden, or
Yeah.
you know, in the Art
Yeah.
Theater,
Yeah.
wherever, there's going to be higher, I guess. But that one was just, and the fact that it was Cliff,
Yeah.
um, that just was the icing on the cake.
All
Anyway,
right on. Mark, I want to thank you so much for taking this time with me today. You've been
thank you,
so
thank
generous,
you.
and you've given me telling me these stories that are just giving me chills. So
Oh, well, that's awesome. I
yeah.
hope, unless you get a cold, then I feel bad.
Okay. Well, I hope not. I've got an Exodus
Oh,
show to attend this Wednesday,
that's right. It's
and
going
I
to
will
be
s-
epic. I've
and I
never
will
been to the Hawthorne either.
Oh,
So I am.
it's a pretty cool venue.
I heard it's pretty awesome. But yeah, I will definitely seek each other out and compare notes too, because I haven't seen Exodus in probably. Well, I should. No, I saw him on the uh, Battle of the Bay or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, I missed that tour, unfortunately.
That
But
was
yeah.
just during COVID 3 years ago, so it's been
Oh, okay. Okay.
about
But
3 years.
yes,
But
I will see you on Wednesday, Mark, and I look forward to it. And I thank you
likewise,
so much
thank
for your
you. Yep.
time. Well, look at this. There we go. Horns in the cam on camera.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark, and I'll talk
Thank
to
you,
you
Nick.
soon.
Take care.
All
Peace.
right. Bye.